Right. So you wanted to really get a handle on some big ideas quickly and like really thoroughly without it feeling like too much.
Yep.
So we're going to jump right into Seneca's on the shortness of life today.
Perfect.
It's not about, you know, feeling like the days are just flying by. And I think we all feel that. But it's about how we actually use the most irreplaceable thing we have, which is time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we all have that feeling, right, of being busy and never having enough hours in the day.
Oh, yeah.
And Seneca, this Roman Stoic philosopher who was around in the first century AD, he cuts through all of that superficial busyness and makes us face this really fundamental question. Are we really living, or are we just kind of, marking time?
Right.
And so what we want to do today is pull out the most powerful insights from Seneca and give you like a fresh perspective on your everyday life.
Yeah. And his core argument hits you like a ton of bricks right from the beginning.
Uh-huh.
He says, life isn't actually short. We just make it that way by being unbelievably wasteful.
Right.
He puts it this way, life is long if you know how to use it. But one man is gripped by insatiable greed, another by a laborious dedication to useless tasks.
Wow.
I mean, it's a pretty direct accusation, isn't it?
Yeah, it
The
is.
shortness isn't something out there, it's something we're doing to ourselves.
Absolutely. And he saw most people just frittering their lives away on things that don't ultimately matter. And what's so amazing is that his list of time wasters, he wrote this 2,000 years ago and it's still relevant today.
It really is. He goes through, insatiable greed, obsessive focus on pointless work, being constantly drunk,
Mm.
just being lazy, the exhausting roller coaster of political ambition where you're totally dependent on what other people think.
Right. It's like he had a time machine.
I know, it's incredible.
Yeah. And all of those examples, right? The greed, the useless tasks, the fleeting political wins, it's all focused externally, right?
Yeah.
It's like constantly looking for validation or satisfaction from outside of ourselves.
Right.
And it seems like he's saying that if your life is tied to those external things, it's always going to feel short and unfulfilled.
And he keeps going. He talks about people who are obsessed with chasing wealth or even just as bad, constantly complaining about their lack of it.
Mm.
The perpetually indecisive, always changing their minds and never finding any real satisfaction. And maybe the most cutting image of all is the people who just drift through life with no purpose at all, and death just kind of sneaks up on them while they're, as he says, languidly yawning.
Wow.
He even says, quote, "It is a small part of life we really live." I mean,
Really makes you think.
it does, doesn't it?
Yeah, Seneca is really pointing out there that so much of what fills our days isn't real living, it's just passing the time.
Yeah.
And he makes this really sharp point about the illusion of peace. Even when we seem calm, on the outside, past desires and pursuits, they can keep us restless on the inside.
Yeah.
Kind of like the ocean is still churning after a storm.
Yeah.
We might think we found tranquility, but the echoes of what we used to be so busy with, they can still drain our present moment.
Now, this is where Seneca gets really interesting. He looks at things that we usually think of as good things, even blessings,
Mm-hmm.
and he says they can actually turn into burdens. He says the fortunate can be choked by their own blessings.
Oh, wow.
Think about it. Wealth can bring a ton of responsibilities and anxiety. The pressure to always perform and show off your talents can lead to burnout, and even having a lot of admirers and clients can leave you with zero time for yourself.
That's a really good point because he's basically saying that success can turn into a cage if you don't manage it carefully.
Right.
And he sees so many people essentially lending their lives out, constantly being pulled in different directions to serve other people's needs and expectations.
Mhm.
And he points out that those whose names are on everyone's lips, the seemingly important people,
Hmm.
they often bear the mark of this exploitation. Their time is not their own.
That's a scary thought. And then he contrasts that with how we guard our possessions, like with our lives.
Yeah,
But we're so careless with our time.
right.
He says, you will find no one willing to share out his money. But to how many does each of us divide up his life?
That's a good point.
It's like we think time is unlimited, when in reality it's the most limited thing we have.
Yeah, the key insight there is this paradox that we're so careful with our stuff,
Yeah.
with our possessions.
Right.
But we waste time. The one thing that we should be stingy with,
Right.
it makes you think about what you actually prioritize.
And then he paints this picture of someone at the end of a long life, and he asks how much of that time was really theirs, how much was free and clear of obligations and distractions,
Right.
how much was lost to sorrow, joy, ambition, social pressures. And his conclusion is that despite a long existence, they've essentially been dying prematurely because so little of that time was really lived.
And that takes us to this really common habit of living as if we're immortal.
Yeah.
Seneca is very critical of this tendency to postpone really living and pursuing wisdom until some far off old age. He asks this really pointed question: aren't you ashamed to keep for yourself just the remnants of your life and to devote to wisdom only that time which cannot be spent on any business?
Yeah.
It's like waiting until you're totally burned out to focus on what matters.
Yeah, and to drive this point home, he gives us these examples of powerful figures from history who achieved amazing things but still constantly yearned for leisure that they could never quite reach.
Right.
Augustus, who controlled the Roman Empire, longed for the day he could finally step aside.
Yeah.
Cicero, even in the middle of intense political activity, was desperate for peace, but he just got overwhelmed. And Livius Drusus, who was ambitious from childhood, actually said at the end of his life that he never had a single day off.
It's amazing, right? Because it shows that worldly success doesn't automatically equal a good life. Even those at the top can feel trapped in this cycle of just striving, never really enjoying the moment.
And all those moments that could be meaningful just disappear.
Right. They slip away.
We don't grab them.
Hmm.
We don't try to slow them down. It's like we think time will always be there.
Yeah, we take it for granted.
And he calls out those who spend their lives in constant pleasure, seeking is the most wasteful of all.
And I think what's really important here is what Seneca says about focus.
Right?
He says that nothing, especially living a good life, can be done well when our minds are scattered.
Yeah.
He says, quote, "The mind, when distracted, absorbs nothing deeply, but rejects everything which is, so to speak, crammed into it."
Yeah.
That feels super relevant today, right, in this world where we're constantly bombarded with information.
Oh my gosh.
Our attention pulled in a million directions. So
Absolutely.
it's like we're drowning in input, but never really absorbing anything.
So what does make a life truly long, according to Seneca?
So for him, it's a life where someone avoids mistakes, they don't waste their time, and they dedicate themselves to self-improvement and understanding.
Go.
He says he has the longest possible life simply because whatever time was available, he devoted entirely to himself.
Interesting.
It's all about being intentional and in control of your own time.
So it's not about just living longer, it's about using that time well.
Exactly. And he points out that even those super successful, enviable people, they sometimes realize this.
Yeah.
In the midst of their busy lives, they'll say, it's impossible to live because everyone wants a piece of them.
That makes sense.
Seneca says we need to examine our days regularly and see how many valuable moments we actually have left.
It's like a personal audit of your most precious resource.
Right, like taking stock.
Exactly.
He also sees so many people rushing, always wanting the future, but never satisfied with the present.
Oh, yeah.
But the person who lives each day as if it were their last, they don't need to worry about tomorrow or be afraid of it. They've embraced today.
This gets to his distinction between existence and really living, right?
Yeah, he says just racking up years, having white hair and wrinkles doesn't mean you've had a long life. It could just be a long existence, like a ship that's been tossed around in storms for decades, but has never actually finished a real journey.
Yeah.
That's deep.
That's a powerful image. And it shows how weird we are about time.
Yeah.
We give it away like it's nothing, but then when we're faced with death, we want every last second.
That's true. We take it for granted.
Such a contradiction.
And he asks us to imagine how we'd act if we knew exactly how many days we had left.
Right.
Makes you realize we don't know how much time we have, so we shouldn't waste it.
And he reminds us that time keeps moving forward no matter what we do.
Absolutely.
You can't stop it,
Yeah.
can't rewind it. He warns, you have been preoccupied while life hastens on. Meanwhile, death will arrive, and you have no choice in making yourself available for that.
So we can't be caught off guard,
So true. And that brings us to the foolishness of putting things off, always planning for some future that might not even happen.
Right.
Seneca says the greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today.
It's like we're so busy preparing for what's next that we miss what's happening now.
Yeah, he even quotes this line of poetry. He says, life's finest day for wretched mortals here is always first to flee. It's like a wake-up call to seize the moment.
Wow. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, we have to engage with time actively, like drinking quickly from a fast stream.
That's a great way to put it.
And he says those who are constantly distracted and never present end up blindsided by old age.
Oh, yeah.
It's like they get there totally unprepared, having made no plans for it.
And they didn't even see it coming.
He breaks time down into 3 parts. The past, the present, which is really short,
Yeah.
and the future, which is totally uncertain.
Mm.
He says those who are preoccupied often lose even the past, either by not thinking about it or being ashamed of how they spent it.
It's interesting how he views the past. He calls it Sacred beyond the reach of fate. A secure and everlasting possession.
Oh, wow.
Like a source of experience and wisdom that we can always tap into if we take the time.
The wise person lives fully in the present, remembers the past with joy, and faces the future without fear.
Exactly. And their life, no matter how many years, is complete and satisfying.
Okay, so we've talked about what Seneca thinks makes a good life.
Yeah.
What about what he doesn't consider true leisure?
So he's critical of things like obsessively collecting art, endlessly going to sporting events, or being way too concerned with how you look. He asks, do you call that man leisured, who arranges with anxious precision his Corinthian bronzes and spends most of the day on rusty bits of metal?
So not really restful pursuits then.
No, not at all. He sees them as just another type of being busy.
And he even uses this crazy example of people so out of touch with their bodies because of all the luxury that they need to be told if they're even sitting down.
You know, it shows how detached they are from real experience.
That's wild, and he says just killing time playing games or sunbathing isn't true leisure either.
Right, for Seneca, real leisure means engaging with something meaningful.
Okay.
And he also criticizes what he sees as pointless academic stuff, like memorizing obscure facts that don't really teach you anything.
He seems to really hate focusing on useless facts.
He says, is it better to know this than to know that the Aventine Hill is outside the Pomerium for one of two reasons, and countless further theories that are either false or very close to lies?
So it's about prioritizing knowledge that actually helps you understand yourself and the world.
Right.
He's got a point.
Yeah, and for Seneca, true leisure is for those who make time for philosophy, the love of wisdom.
Okay.
He says, of all people, only those are at leisure who make time for philosophy. Only those are really alive.
So it's about engaging with deep ideas and great minds.
Right.
It's almost like having these brilliant friends who are always there for you.
Exactly. And what's great about these intellectual companions is that they're always available.
Yeah.
They help you understand things, they guide you through life's challenges, and they teach you how to live and how to die.
Wow.
And their wisdom is free and accessible to everyone.
That's beautiful. And he says by engaging with these great minds, we're choosing our intellectual lineage, becoming like their children.
Right, inheriting their wisdom.
So the wise person lives fully in the present, cherishes the past, and approaches the future with peace.
Exactly. They've got it all in harmony.
But those who don't do this, who neglect their own lives.
They eventually realize too late that they've been busy with things that don't matter.
Yeah, and the joys they had were fleeting,
Yeah.
faints a nothing solid, leaving them empty.
And he points out how unstable those kinds of joys are. They're based on superficial external stuff.
Uh-huh.
He says real happiness needs to come from a deeper place within.
Interesting.
He also says that, ironically, outward success often comes with a lot of anxiety.
Right. The more you have to lose.
And fortune, he says, is least trustworthy when it seems the most generous.
Right.
So we end up constantly chasing this future state of leisure that never comes because we're always busy with something new.
So it's like running on a treadmill. You never actually get anywhere.
Right. And then Seneca gives this really personal advice to his friend Paulinus. He tells him to step back from the demands of public life and focus on himself and his intellectual growth. He says, extract yourself from the crowd. You must at last retire into a peaceful harbor. Take some of your own time for yourself, too.
So it's not about just doing nothing. It's about shifting your focus to something more meaningful.
Exactly. And he sees philosophy as engaging with the biggest questions about life: the nature of the divine, the fate of the soul, the workings of the universe.
Wow.
He says, turn your thoughts to these studies. In this kind of life, you will find much that is worth your study. The love and practice of the virtues, forgetfulness of the passions, the knowledge of how to live and die, and a life of deep tranquility.
And finally, he talks about how truly miserable those people are whose lives are controlled by what others want.
Right. They only have a tiny bit of their life that they can really call their own.
It's like they're living someone else's life.
And he points out that chasing public approval and honors often comes at the cost of your own life.
And some people want to work until they die. They see old age as this annoying obstacle that stops them.
Yeah, he highlights how unaware people are of their own mortality, making these big plans for the future while ignoring the present.
So in the end, it's not about how many years you live. It's about how well you use the time you have.
Right, that's the takeaway. A life well lived isn't measured in years. It's about intention and meaning.
Exactly. And hopefully, as we've talked about Seneca's ideas, you've had some insights, maybe recognizing those areas in your own life where you're stuck in that busy but idle trap.
Yeah, or putting off real engagement for some future that might not even happen.
Exactly.
So we encourage you to think about which of Seneca's examples really resonated with you.
Yeah.
Are there things you do or ways you think that you might want to re-examine based on what we've talked about today?
And here's a final thought to chew on. Seneca says a truly long life isn't about years. It's about the depth and intention of our moments.
Right.
So how could shifting your focus from the quantity of time to the quality of your experiences change how you approach your whole life starting right now? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for listening.